Welcome to the Solomon's Corner podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Roberts. This is a place for thinkers. So if you like to talk about ideas, if you like to get interesting book ideas, if you like to write, if you like to do all those things and talk to interesting people, we are a place for you. So please like, subscribe, share our content. Also, everyone who listens to the show, we drop a promo code once a week for our e-store this week in honor of Moms for Liberty. It will be promo code Moms for Liberty. So you will get 20% off on our e-store. You can check us out at solomonsconner.com. Click on the store tab, and you will be able to see all our intellectual life swag. We are interviewing Tiffany Justice today of Moms for Liberty. It was an incredible, inspiring interview, so please make sure you, again, like and subscribe. Leave comments in below so that way we can boost this video out onto the YouTube algorithms and also support Moms for Liberty. So make sure that you share this with your friends, and I hope that you enjoy. Once again, I'm Daniel Roberts. Keep thinking.
Welcome to the Solomon's Corner podcast, a place for thinkers. Join us as we explore the depths of theology, philosophy, and the Christian intellectual life.
Welcome to the Solomon's Corner podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Roberts. This is a place for thinkers. And if you care about the truth, if you care about a thoughtful life and investing in that, this is a good place for you. Today, we are doing an interview with Tiffany Justice. She is the co-founder of Moms for Liberty. She is a wife and mom of 4 school-age children. In 2016, she stepped up to serve for 4 years on the school district of Indian River County, Florida School Board. She believes that kids in public school deserve innovation and parents have the right to know the union interference and government bureaucracy that is keeping that innovation from happening in their children's district. And Moms for Liberty has just exploded onto the scene. They started, I believe, in 2020. I'm sure Tiffany will correct me on that date if I got that wrong. But you can follow them on Twitter at Moms for Liberty. That's a number 4. Moms for Liberty on there. They have just exploded. They have over, hold on, I have it on my notes here. 270 chapters, 44 states, and 100,000 members plus and growing. So we are really excited to have Tiffany here to talk about how Moms for Liberty is making a difference and in kids' education and their rights. So welcome, Tiffany Justice.
Thank you for having me on the show.
No problem. And also, I just wanted to this is the kind of the question I had for you is, do you find it a little bit providential that your last name is Justice, given the work that you're doing?
So it's my married name. I've been married. I've been married for 19 years. My husband and I have 4 children, and his last name is Justice. And of course, when we got married, I was happy to take his last name, and our children have the Justice. But yes, I had no idea. I think it's very funny. And when I served on school board, all the kids used to call me Mrs. Justice League. So I would walk in and they would say, Justice League. So yes, it's a funny last name. I always joke and say I did not change my last name like Ibram Kendi did. This is
there you go. Well, there you go. I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, at the end of the day, that's like, that's like a love story made for freedom. You know what I mean? It's just very, very cool.
In that, he'll like that.
Yes, yeah. So tell us just real quick for people that don't know Moms for Liberty, how did you guys get started? Like, what was the kind of napkin and coffee kind of moment that you guys had where you're like, this is how we need to do something?
Yeah, so I served on school board from 2016 to 2020, as did Tina, so co-founder of Moms for Liberty, Tina Deskovich, and we live 1 county apart from each other. We didn't know each other, though. People often assume that we were friends. I mean, I like her. We work very well together. We're partners in this endeavor, but we're not like friends, right? We were 2 women who had a very similar experience serving in elected office. And during COVID, when parental rights were really, really tested, and we saw all of these local elected officials and bureaucrats and, really just trampling all over parental rights, Tina and I rose up on our respective school boards in a very similar fashion, where there would be a lot of votes. There are 5-seat boards where Tina and I would be the 1 down vote. And then there would be 4 votes voting to, really usurp parental rights. And so we found each other kind of through some mutual friends and then some of the reporting we were seeing happening. And Tina contacted me. She ran again and lost her race. I did not run again. I was ready to move on and try some other things because I had felt that I had hit a wall with my school board in being able to create change. And I knew that we needed to do a little bit something different. I wasn't sure what that was, though. Tina did. Tina contacted me in December of 2020 and said, hey, we need to do something here. We need to help these moms and dads that are stepping up. We need to help them to be effective advocates. And I said, I still remember, I said, I was going to take December off. I had just come off 4 years of a very contentious school board time, right? And especially during COVID, fighting very hard to get schools reopened, to keep masks off of kids, to protect
Mm-hmm.
parental rights at that very much local level. And she said, no, we've got to do this. And we need to do it now. And so we sat through the month of December, going over some of the different things that we knew needed to happen. We wrote our mission statement, which is still the same today, and launched Moms for Liberty January 1st of 2021.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Man, so you guys got the Twitter handle, and then boom, you guys were up and running. That's crazy. So when you say, support parents, does that mean that you were kind of seeing what we were all seeing with these parents going to school board meetings and things like that, and then just basically being kind of forced out in a lot of ways? How is that what you mean by you guys saw this same stuff and you said somebody's got to do something? Is that what you mean?
No, we saw parents coming. Tina will tell a story about a woman that came to the school board and she said, I'm going to report you to the county commission.
Mm.
And Tina said she sat there and thought to herself, okay, well, the county commission has nothing to do with the school board. So it was just this
Yes.
idea of coming to an understanding, right, of people want to affect the policies. They want to make changes happen, but they don't know how to do it. And we wanted them to be effective advocates. My own personal experience was seeing microphones be shut off, people not allowed to give citizen input, and me having to fight very hard for all parents to be able to speak, even the ones who were against me at the time, because there were a lot of people that were very mad at me for wanting it to be the right of the parent to direct, or recognizing that it was the right of the parent to direct any type of masking or quarantining of the child. And so in my own district, I was dealing with parents coming forward and saying, my child is suffering because of these masks. Either my child's speech is regressing, my own son's speech was regressing, or parents would come and say, there was one woman who said, my daughter is deaf. So now she has to wear a mask. She also has limited vision in one of her eyes. So she wears glasses, which are fogging. She needs a medical exemption. And doctors weren't willing to give medical exemptions because my superintendent and different in the Department of Health and the hospital in my community had tried to come together on a committee to force us to make certain decisions. And doctors were afraid they would lose privileges at the hospital or their medical license. And so I fought really, really hard for those parents, because I said, you've got a parent who's saying the mask is harming their child. Parents know best for their children. Love is an expertise. And I'm not going to allow you. That's where we do not co-parent with the government comes from. That T-shirt we have and the saying. I said to the superintendent while I was on the school board, he wanted to make a medical committee. And I said, sir, I said, you don't get to choose my child's doctor. And even when I choose my own child's doctor, it's still up to me to make decisions for my own child. That's a recommendation, not a mandate from my child's doctor. And so I said no to the medical committee. And I said, we do not co-parent with the government. And then we created that T-shirt. We started with $500 in Tina's back bedroom. And then we created the T-shirt and we sold about $150,000 worth of T-shirts in our first year.
Whoa, man. I mean, that like you got the T-shirt thing going, like you guys just started it up and made thousands of dollars. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I mean, we needed to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Where can you get the T-shirt on the Moms for Liberty website?
Yeah, just go to the store on the Moms for Liberty website. We have a lot of the merchandise there too. And it's just been great. People walk into a school board meeting, they see someone with a Moms for Liberty T-shirt on. They know exactly what they stand for, and they know that they stand with.
Yeah. So as far as the COVID stuff, because that was one of the other questions I had, is number one, it came out of nowhere, and it was really hard to know. What I've told people is that propaganda works, and one of the things that it tries to do is it tries to get you to not believe something else. It's to make you believe you can't know, and so that your agency is just gone, because everybody knows that if you believe something to be true, you're gonna act on it. But if the truth is not certain, then you're less likely to act. And so a lot of times
Yes.
people, even people on the conservative movement, were focused on, well, I bet you they're doing this, or I bet you they're doing that, or I bet they're trying to find that like kernel rather than focusing on like what you guys are focusing on, the truths of, well, I'm a parent and you don't get the right to tell, like, that's the thing that cuts through the propaganda. But then the other hand, you're also helping people have effective strategy, which, you know, I know that we've seen one of the reason things that kind of came up for us to come and interview you was, I believe it was Michael Knowles on the Daily Wire. He covered one of your guys' success stories that was in South Carolina. I think it was. Wasn't it in South Carolina? You guys flipped a school board, I think, entirely. Was it South Carolina, Lindsay?
Yeah.
I think so. I think,
Yeah.
wasn't it in the Charleston area?
Yeah, it sure was. Berkeley
Yeah.
County and then Charleston County as well. Yeah.
Which, you guys seem to continue to win and win and win. But like you said, even I'm sitting here going, well, what is an effective strategy? I talk to people all the time. They're like, well, what are we supposed to do? And it really shows you how well they prevented people from knowing what levers of power they can actually pull. And so they end up pulling, something that they think is a lever, like, I'm going to report you. And you're like, well, that's not going to do anything. It's an empty threat, and they know it. One of the questions I had for you, though, on COVID, because I've seen, I think everybody feels the sentiment is never again, right? Like, we're not going to let this happen again. What do you think we could have done differently if Moms for Liberty, let's say, starts in 2019, right? And you've got this group of organized individuals. What could we have done to have prevented it from getting as bad as it did?
I think we could have said no. We could have said no to them forced masking, no to the healthy quarantining. It was ridiculous, the idea that the health department would walk in with a 6-foot ruler and do a circle every time it's someone that may or may not have had COVID and quarantine. I mean, in my own school district, there would be 40, 60 kids at a time being quarantined from any given school. Yeah. It was ridiculous. These are healthy kids.
Yeah. Or like masks on cross country runners. I was
Yeah,
a track athlete. Yeah.
Yeah. James Lindsay, who is a friend of mine, a member of our advisory board, has said before, the way you stop these things is you just don't do them. But what I think that you said is so important was the fact that they didn't want people to feel they had agency. And in fact, they very much wanted you to doubt whether or not you had fundamental rights that they couldn't curb or take away. And the truth of the matter is that parental rights are fundamental rights. These are not rights the government gives you. They are not rights they can take away. So they may be able to restrict certain things that you can or can't do, but the idea of you directing the upbringing, the education, the medical care of your child is not something you ask permission to do. But I talk to moms in Washington, Oregon, California, the trampling of their rights, the way that they were made to feel that they needed to bow the knee to an expert class who knew better than them for their own family and children was crazy. And so you ask me what would be different if Moms for Liberty had been around. I think there would have been immediately a very, very large united front like we have now saying, no, we're not going to put masks on our children. We're not going to have them sit outside in 30-degree weather on the concrete eating their sandwiches. We're not going to tell us you can't come into our children's schools. No. And if we had done that in the way that we needed to immediately, I think our government would have seen that, the people really do have the power. Unfortunately, we didn't have that, but our mission statement is very clear. It's to unify, educate, and empower parents to defend their parental rights at all levels of government. The unify portion is incredibly important to bring people together, to let people know they are not alone in their thinking, and then to educate them on the issues. And then once you have parents who know inherently, right, they know intrinsic something's wrong. This isn't right. This shouldn't be happening. And then you educate them on the issues. And very quickly, early on, we saw that masking in schools was going to have absolutely no impact on transmission and spread. And we had evidence of places in Florida and other places in Europe that had stayed open, daycare centers, boys and girls clubs, for example, in Florida had stayed open. So we had all of this data to show that the transmission rate in communities where schools had stayed open were not higher, and the child morbidity rate was not higher. And so, just being more honest about those facts, pushing them all across the country, that's the other thing. I cannot tell you how incredibly important it has been to have moms from around the country talking to each other.
Yes.
California, Oregon moms, talking with New York moms, talking with Florida moms, in South Carolina and Indiana and Wisconsin and Texas and Louisiana. It's amazing
Yep.
what they
Yeah.
learn from each other, how they help each other, and how we know what happens in California doesn't stay in California.
Yep.
And now, instead of waiting for it to happen and for harm to happen, instead of waiting for a child to be raped in a bathroom, like in
Right.
Loudoun County, Virginia, we see not a good idea to have boys and girls spaces. Let's put a stop to that. Right. And
Yep.
so I have an analogy that I like to use, that parents don't put bike helmets on their children because they've been hurt before. You put
Yeah.
a bike helmet on your child because you know the potential is there for them to get hurt. Parents in America are not going to wait for harm to come to their children before they work to have legislation and policies passed to protect their children from harm.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think, there's that experiment that I've heard for years. So I haven't, it's one of those things where it's just kind of ubiquitous in the culture. But, the idea that, you take a student in to a room of like 100 students, and the teacher holds up an apple and he says it's a banana. And, everybody says, yep, 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 yep. And then the kid gets to the kid who's under the experiment, and he feels all this pressure to deny reality, right? But if there's one other person in there who says, no, it's an apple, all of a sudden, like, that kid's ready to do that. And, I had that same experience. I think if you're a person of faith, if you're a Christian, or just a religious person in general, and you find yourself in a highly secular environment and you have to stand for your convictions, if there's one other person there, even if they're not a Christian, that just is like, hey, guys, lay off, all of a sudden you feel way more empowered. And I think this is one of the areas where I my background is, I went to seminary and have been in religious nonprofit areas for quite a while, and growing up in the church. But I think one of the things that was shocking to me was how the churches could have been that kind of, hey, you're not alone situation. I think a lot of people, I know I was, were shocked that the churches were actually just, peddling the same kind of propaganda unquestioningly. Like a lot of churches didn't even know that they had religious exemption in their states to stay open. And so, or to conduct themselves the way that they always have been. It was just, we recommend it not to be this way. But that was one of the other things, was that you felt like all these things that were like social fabric, that they were kind of fraying, and
They
you
wanted
kind of felt, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is about the demoralization of America. You talked
Mm-hmm.
about people having agency, feeling they can make a difference, feeling hopeful. That is not what the global elites
Yep.
in the world right now, or leadership in America right now, in the deep state. And I do believe that there's a deep administrative state that
Mm-hmm.
is controlling a lot of what happens, regardless of who is actually in the position and leading in
Yeah.
power. They do want a demoralization of people. And I think we see it through what happened during COVID with adults. I think we see it through what's happening in our schools with our children, and the constant bombardment of violence and sexuality and the sexualization of our kids. Really, the
Yeah.
government wants to be the answer for everything. And if the church exists, then that is a barrier to that. If the family exists, then that is a barrier to control. So
Yeah, and I just want to comment on that too, because a lot of times people hear deep state and they hear, global elite or whatever, and they think that's a new thing, but it really isn't, because again, I have this book, by the way, by Harvard Press, that just happens to be in my camera angle here. Hold on. It's other side. Hold on. Mine's backwards. But it's the Black Book of Communism. Now, this is expensive, so, but I always recommend it to people because it's a series of essays from people who lived under communism, and talks about the way that propaganda was used. I mean, even in just the first couple chapters. I mean, it like, I've only read like 30 pages of it, and I always have material just from those 30 pages to talk about it. But it's not anything new. This idea of a top-down kind of global influence of really powerful people being able to make individual lives just awful. And
and
it's not a conspiracy theory.
No, it's not a conspiracy theory. And I think it's important for people to know that none of the issues are, the issue may be new, right? Climate
Right.
change, whatever the target or the pivot issue is, right? But the overall arching goal is not new. I mean, communism is where, many would like America to go. America
Mm-hmm.
as a free nation, giving, liberty to individuals, right? Showing liberty, saying you have the right to, you get your rights not from the government, but from
Yep.
God or nature's God. It is unique and special and
Yep.
inspiring.
Yeah.
To the world. And, we are in a very dangerous place right now
Hmm.
because America truly is the beacon of freedom and light and liberty. And
Yeah.
we are in a position where for years, there has been a many year campaign to take our children from us, to indoctrinate them in a new way of thinking. And, those things are now happening. We can look at the midterms, look at the way people are voting, look at the
Hmm.
shift in different things. I asked someone the other day, a friend of mine, because we were watching was it the Grammys, where they did all the Sam Smith, Satan, all worship
Yeah.
stuff that they did. And I remember watching, maybe you do, I remember watching music videos when I was younger,
Yeah.
or music awards, and my parents would be like, oh, what is this? What is this
Yeah.
nonsense?
Yes. I thought that same thing.
Oh, mom and dad, like it's just music, and, blah, blah, blah. And so I asked my friend, I said to him, I said, I gotta ask you, is it the same thing and just getting worse, or is it new? Am I overreacting, right? Is it a generational thing where it's always kind of like this? And he said yes and no. He said yes, but it's purposeful and well intentioned, and it's an extension. It's like a slow boil. Madonna was where you guys were when you were younger, but you
Hmm.
see where it has come now, and you see her coming out and saying, wonderful, well
Hmm.
done. Everyone has taken it to the level where you want it to be. And I think we need to be really honest. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a mom of four. I'm a married
Yeah.
woman. I want a happy, bright future for my children, but I have some real concerns about the future of our country, especially given the state of education right now.
Hmm. Well, and again, I think that it just comes down to ideas have consequences, right?
Yeah.
Ideas do not just, sit there in a nice sterile container where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, And again, people on the other side of the aisle recognize this, right? Because they want to stop the ideas that conflict with their values and ideas. I think one of the things that people don't realize with freedom, they oftentimes like to quote, an unjust law is no law at all, which is true, right? A law not enforced is also no law at all, because obviously you can't follow a law that's not enforced, and you don't have any safety in laws that aren't enforced. But this also is a parallel in freedom. Freedom that you don't use, you're going to lose. And
Mhm.
the reason why we're losing a lot of our freedoms is because, again, just in the education system, I mean, most people don't even know how the politics work, and I'm not talking like young kids. I'm saying like my generation. We came through and we got basically the last time I remember having any sort of political discussion about how the government actually worked is in 8th grade, right? And then after that, it was all, uh, well, capitalism sucks and all this kind of stuff. And it's one of those things where, like you're saying, if you don't use your freedom, you are going to lose it. It's just like a law. If it's not used, it basically doesn't exist. I wanted to move on real quick to a couple things around like actual, like, we talk about communism, but obviously that comes in different forms, and they're always changing the name. That's one of the tactics of propaganda, constantly change the name, which again you can read about in Gulag Archipelago. Just read about how many times they changed the name of the secret police. It's absolutely dizzying. You actually have to have a glossary in the back to find out if you're talking about a government committee or another name for the secret police. But the thing I was going to ask you about was, on the Dr. Phil show, you mentioned, and this was, I believe, back in January 2022, so not too long ago, but it probably feels like a while for you because things are just moving so quick. But you mentioned CRT was not being taught in schools, which I thought was a brilliant move, by the way, because it was like, I was like, oh my word, she said what? And then all of a sudden you go, it is being brought in through DEI and SEL. How are these, especially SEL, vehicles for CRT? And for those who don't know, SEL is social emotional learning. Is that the correct acronym?
That
I'm
is
I'm not the mom, so I try to remember these acronyms, but I have a hard time keeping up with them, especially when there's all these COVID 3-letter acronyms as well. So what is the SEL as a vehicle? How is that moving? Because obviously they're changing these things constantly. So
yeah.
what
So
is the SEL?
I can talk about SEL. I'm a mom of four. My oldest is 18. My youngest is 11. So we'll go back to when my 18-year-old was in kindergarten. I actually was I volunteered in the classroom. And one of the things the teacher wanted me to do was to work with this program, Second Step, which is an SEL program. This is years and years ago, and this is actually one of the earlier versions of Second Step. But I didn't know as a mom. I thought, okay, well, this is good. You're helping kids to learn how to deal with their anger. You don't hit, you can take deep breaths, you can count to 10, you could take a walk around the playground. Those were the types of things we were talking about. Johnny stole your pencil. What could you do instead of hitting Johnny? What could you do to get your pencil back and to still be friends, right? Like,
Yep.
that was kind of what it was. That is not what SEL is anymore, nor was it actually what it was intentioned to be. The best example, the best way I can give this to parents, to explain to parents, is this. When you have a child, you tell your child to trust their instincts. You'll say to them, if you get a funny feeling in your tummy, if you think mommy and daddy aren't going to like that, then you should stop and you should think about that, right? You
Yep.
should trust yourself and the values and the morals that we're instilling in you as an individual. SEL wants the opposite. James Lindsay has said they put a hook in the heart to lead the child away from their head. That is profound to me. What they do is just like they did with the masks, right? You wear the mask to make other people feel better. It's more important for other people to feel safe. Forget whether or not they work or not, 5-year-old child who has trouble, hearing. Your teacher needs to feel safe, and you wearing a mask will make her feel safe. Or other issues. When we talk about CRT, children are not racist. I don't believe that children are born racist. I think adults teach children to be racist, but very much I volunteered in a lot of classrooms, and we'll talk about we'll talk about early education, right? We'll talk pre-K, K through 3, especially. Children do not pick their friends based on the color of their skin.
Right.
In order for a child to think about things like racism, you're going to have to impart upon them ideas about difference and ideas about, difference in society. And so how do you make a child who has never had any thoughts of like this introduced to them believe something like that? Well, you're going to have to tell them that they are going to have to what they think is wrong, and that they need to change what they think or what their parents think in order to make other people feel better. Whether that's, I have a mommy and daddy home and that's privilege, and you don't share that because you don't want other children to feel bad about it, or you don't celebrate children doing well on a test and getting 100% on a spelling test because other children didn't do as well, and now you want to ensure that no child feels bad. And so, CRT isn't being explicitly taught in elementary school and high school. They're not putting children through a class on critical race theory where they're discussing, legal theory. That's not what's happening. What's happening is that SEL has been used as a Trojan horse to be able to introduce into the classroom different generative themes that the teachers would like to discuss with the children. What are those generative themes? Where do they come from? Well, I'll be honest with you. Right now, you need to look no further than the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations to see the generative themes from a global aspect that the United Nations, World Economic Forum, and unfortunately, a lot of people in power in America would like infused into public education. This is how you get a kindergarten lesson on starvation and world hunger. We're talking about kindergarten. These people who can't read or write, but vocabulary words like starvation, injustice, genocide, these are not normal words to introduce to a child.
Right. Well, and the curriculum for global hunger used to be finish your food on your plate because there's kids starving in Africa that don't get what you get. So be thankful. And the kid was just basically.
And now in Iowa, in grades 3 through 5, with a curriculum called Wit and Wisdom, they have a book called The Shadow Children that they'd read from. I suggest everyone to go look at the book series, The Shadow Children. The author herself speaks about when writing it that she and her husband, it was inspired by a conversation that they had about whether or not they should have more than 2 children, what the impact would be on the climate. And so she wrote a series of children's books. How did I find out about those books? Because a mom had a child in her home who was reading those books, who was afraid she might get pregnant again. And then the child would have to live in the shadows because that's what happened in the book. Now, again, we go back to the author and we say, what could the author's intention have been? She very specifically states that she did not give it a time period or an actual location so that children in America could imagine it happening at any given time or place. And so, again, grades 3 through 5, we're talking about 8 through 11. Why is this type of dystopian information and negative information being introduced into the mind of a child?
Yeah. Well, and it also creates a hopeless sense as well, which again, I think, a lot of people try to find this one thing that's causing, you know, anxiety and depression rates to rise in kids. But it's not just one idea. It's that they're getting attacked on every single level, from
Every
their
side.
gender to the, you know, global situation where basically unless you're Iron Man, you're screwed. And of course, no kid's gonna nobody not everybody can be the Elon Musk of the world or whatever. You have to understand that you still have value even if you're not that. Um, and
Yeah.
if you're constantly sitting there wondering if you should even exist because ultimately your existence causes pain and suffering and all this kind of stuff, well, what's the logical conclusion from that? Well, you don't have to, think too hard about it to figure it out. So we've only got a couple more minutes here. So what are some of the things that what are some signs that you see the tides have shifted in our favor? Would you say they've shifted in our favor, or what are some big wins that you think people should know about in order to be encouraged?
I think the tide has shifted in our favor because you see more and more people standing up and saying, I'm not going to allow these labels to define me. I'm not going to be silenced or shamed or intimidated. And I'll be honest, Moms for Liberty has a really diverse membership base. It's been
Mm-hmm.
very interesting. We have about 65% of our members are registered Republicans, but a large number of independents and a growing number of Democrats.
Wow.
A lot of people that had never been involved in politics before. We endorsed in over 500 school board races in 2022, and 76% of the endorsed candidates were first-time candidates. So I'm very excited about what the future holds. You have people. I was a mom, a business person, a mom. I ran for school board, and look at what I learned and what I've been able to do. Tina is
Yeah.
the same. We know other women and men in the country who have a similar experience. So I think it's exciting to think about the fact that people are running in their local community, meeting people, building an army around them, and perhaps they'll go on to other offices. So, creating more George Washingtons who are not looking for a career in politics, but looking to help to lead their community and then step back to normal
Mm-hmm.
life. And so that makes me very hopeful. The other thing that I'll share is this: 115,000 members in Moms for Liberty, plus lots of other parents around the country that we see rising up and speaking out, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're raising a new generation of patriots.
Yeah.
There's going to be a new generation of children in this world who understand their place and their purpose, who believe that they do have agency, that what they say and think and do matters, and that they can get involved and make a difference. And so, Moms for Liberty, there's been a lot said, oh, you're not grassroots, you're not this. I assure you, we are completely real grassroots people who just decided that something had to be done, and Moms for Liberty was our best idea.
Yeah.
And we really believed in moms. We really believe in moms and their
Yeah.
love for their children. And if anything's going to turn the tide in America and is going to save us from communism, is going to save us from this kind of globalist takeover, which is truly happening in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
different ways, it's going to be moms who are going to stand up, and dads, and speak out for their children in this country. So I'm
Yeah.
hopeful.
Yeah, I am too, and that leads me to another question. I probably should have led with this one because it's a little more depressing, and then we could have ended on a more lighter note. But what are some of the intimidation tactics that you guys have seen? Because I think a lot of times people, the apathetic people, is what I mean. The individuals who kind of like, well, yeah, I know that kind of stuff's going on, but whatever. It's not that bad. Like what are some of the things that you guys have seen as far as th- people acting against your group or ways that they've tried to intimidate you guys to be silent?
Yeah, I think there are more than I'd actually like to share. There's so many different things that have been done. I mean, I've had death threats on me, on the
Mm-hmm.
children, on my children, feces sent to our house. Satan writes to us every Sunday, apparently. I'll share that message with you, a very long email message every Sunday from Satan, who can be reached at 666-666-6666. But a lot of intimidation tactics, a lot
Yeah.
of retaliation at schools. I just think here's what's important for people to remember and understand. Moms for Liberty and other parents and people questioning the education system in America are disrupting the balance of power in education.
Mm-hmm.
That's very important to understand because there's a lot of money in education. There are a
Mm,
lot of people that make a lot of money off of education or hope to make a lot of money off of
yep.
education. Ed tech is like $1 billion industry. And so, you look at the teachers unions and the way that they have orchestrated things in the past, but many, many other people make a lot of money, including the Democrat Party, off of education. And so it's very concerning when you see the way that people are willing to subvert parents' rights and the education of children to protect the system.
Hmm.
And we do have an educational industrial complex in America. The way that we're going to fix that is by using the system to reform the system. And that's why Moms for Liberty has gotten involved in the way that we have. We believe in education freedom for every child. We believe the parent knows best for their child and should make the best decision and be equipped to make the best informed decision for their
Hmm.
child. However, public education is going to continue to exist in America,
Yep.
and children deserve to learn to read. So, the last thing I'll leave with all of you is only about a third of America's children are reading on grade level in fourth grade. That is very, very concerning. There is no future for America with a nation of people who cannot read, who cannot write, who cannot do math. They cannot be discerning citizens. We learned during COVID how important it was for all of us to be able to do our own research, to look at the data, and to make our own decisions. I think Americans have proved in pushing back in the way that we have that we're able to do that. We're capable of doing that. And so, what we need to worry about now is a nation of children growing up who wouldn't be able to do that. And if you think about if you hadn't been able to read or to write or to do math or to look at data and to
Hmm.
analyze statistics, we wouldn't have been able to push back against COVID as successfully as we did and the mandates in the way that we did. And so, I think they're banking on a nation of fairly uneducated people who will just feel that they're beholden to the government for everything in their lives. And we are banking on the fact that the American spirit is alive and well. And we're going to work really, really hard to empower liberty minded individuals to lead.
Yep, and I'll leave you with this: is that means that parents, you need to take a very vested interest in your mind and in your understanding of freedom, and that's going to start with you, and it's going to have to trickle down to your kids because this is definitely a culture war in which it starts with the parents in order for them to defend the rights of kids because kids cannot defend themselves. So make sure that Tiffany Justice lives up to her namesake by starting with yourself, and make sure you follow Moms for Liberty for encouragement and hopefulness about what is going on, as well as actual practical strategies that can turn the tide in this fight. Tiffany, thank you very much for joining us. And to everybody else, I'm Daniel Roberts. This is Solomon's Corner. Keep thinking.